Edmond Dantes, Count of Monte Cristo. When we first met the character, he is a young sailor with only 19 years old. In 1850, Edmond Dantes had at this point in the story a promising future as a ship captain and his beautiful fiancée Mercedes. In February of that year, the ship arrived at the port of Merced. After a journey in which he assumed the position of captain when the ship's captain died, he never gets to realize his future as he is betrayed and sent to a prison, even though he was innocent.
Edmond Dantes' goals before going to prison were to be a good ship captain and marry his fiancée Mercedes. After he escaped from prison, his goals changed. Now he wants revenge.
I missed you so.
Missing is over now.
Edmond Dantes, also known as the Count of Monte Cristo, has many fortes. He is a noble man and trustworthy to many. He is a man with great faith and intelligence. He uses his learned skills to redeem himself. He was a hard worker, earned an honest living, working in a ship following the captain's orders. He was such an honorable man that when the captain dies in the ship, Monsieur Morel, the ship owner, makes Dantes captain of the ship because he was very impressed with how Dantes handled the ship. Dantes doesn't have many accomplishments up to that point other than becoming captain of a ship and having the love of Mercedes and of his father. But he becomes very wealthy and knowledgeable thanks to a friend he encounters in prison. With his money came the power he needed to gain vengeance. As a Count of Monte Cristo, he was smart, he knew how to read and write. He is also able to own everything his heart desires. He can now protect himself because he also learns how to become a much better fighter. His greatest accomplishment was getting vengeance on Fernand and having him lose everything and everyone who contributed to his being sent to prison. Edmond Dantes was a noble man. He was a loyal friend to everyone. He was trusted by many, even though he was not born into money. He underwent hardships, working in a ship to earn a living and make the best with what he had. He wasn't selfish or envious of others. He was a good son who took care of his father and his friend Fernand. Dantes was nurturing as well and was in love with a young lady by the name of Mercedes, and they were to be married. Dantes was a religious man who believed God saw everything. He didn't have many skills. Dantes could not read, write, add, or even fight very well. He wasn't very perceptive and trusted all, even those who later betrayed him out of envy. While in prison, Dantes encounters a gentleman by the name of Abe Faria, a very remarkable gentleman who happens to be a priest. This priest teaches Dantes mathematics, reading, writing, and even how to fight. He teaches him the skills Dantes would need to survive during his 14 years in prison. Dantes becomes full of hatred and vengeance. This is what keeps him alive. Dantes survives through all the punishment and unfair treatment, yet he never loses his faith in God. This shows that Dantes is still a good man underneath it all. Dantes plots his escape upon the death of the priest. He uses his learned skills and perceptiveness to escape the prison. He later changes his identity and is known to all as the Count of Monte Cristo. He then begins to take vengeance upon those who set him up and caused his suffering for so many years. At the same time, as the Count of Monte Cristo, he helps those who have always remained loyal to him.
Dantes had a good work ethic. He got promoted captain because of his leadership, but his co-worker Douglas, who wanted to be captain, was angry and jealous about the decision. started to plot against Edmond. Edmond Dantes faced a big challenge. After he got promoted captain, his co-worker Baron Danglas was angry and jealous. His best friend Fernand Montego was also jealous because he was in love with Dantes' fiancée. Fernand Montego and Baron Danglars have Dantes charged with treason. Dantes spent several years in prison. At the beginning, his situation seems hopeless and Dantes feels like giving up, but he didn't. He becomes self-motivated. While in prison, he learned hand and sword combat and military strategy from his inmate Abbe Feria. He also learned how to read. After 14 years, he escaped from the prison and became later the Count of Monte Cristo. He became naturally intelligent and emotionally.
Interpersonal skills. Dantes worked well with his mates. First, he was friends with Fernand, and they kept a nice relationship until Fernand betrayed him. Then in prison he met with Abbe Faria, an old priest who taught him a lot of stuff. He learned with him how to fight properly and how to write and how to read. He escaped from prison and found a friend who helped him to search the treasure. They found the treasure and they worked together throughout Dante's revenge. Paradigm and paradigm shift. Edmond Dantès passed through different paradigm shifts. First, Edmond sees his life in a very positive way. He has everything to be happy. He suffers a paradigm shift when he is condemned for life without trial. Second paradigm, Edmond plots his revenge. Third paradigm, Edmond understands that his revenge has gone too far.
Edmond Dantes showed great character features. The way Dantes manages life-threatening situation and injustice that was done to him. This is a reflection of his excellent usage of personal psychological resources such as mindfulness, patience, wisdom, proactiveness, persistence, and so on. Dantes was under a lot of stress because he was accused and sent to prison for something he didn't do. He didn't internalize the stress and actual anger he possessed at the moment, but systematically focused on a possible solution at his awful and miserable condition. More specifically, all his proactiveness allowed him to stay spirited and then find a way to escape from prison. Some of these Dante's proactive behaviors included learning from his prison mate, digging holes to escape, and looking forward into his freedom. Once he managed to get out again, Dantes exercises his physiological strength to skillfully and not violently take back everything his ex-friend and the governor took away from him. Thus, this main focus was not to violently revenge, but firstly get on his feet and regain the life that was taken away from him.
Self-esteem issues. At the start of the book, we can perceive that Edmond Dantes has a high self-esteem. He is young and successful, and he got recently promoted. His fiancée to Mercedes. After he sent to prison, he became depressed, but with the help of Abbe Faria, he got better.
Communication skills. When Dantes was young, he was a good lover and a happy man, but he wasn't good with words. And we can see this clearly when he was sentenced to prison and wasn't able to defend himself. He didn't know what to say or how to convince other people, although it was a complot. Once he was in prison, Faria showed him a lot of literature, so he became and educated men and good with the words. Later on, revenge was in every part of his mind, so he gave speeches in several parties in accordance to meet with his enemies and convince them to do what he wanted to do, and he did convince everybody, and they fall in every trap he put for them.
Leadership style. The Count of Monte Cristo has an autocratic leadership style. He's the one who has the power.
Critical thinking about Edmond Dantes. I think Dantes went too far with his vengeance. In part was okay because his enemies deserved it. He was loved and they took off everything from him. He could live with the fortune for the rest of his life, forgetting all about the past times. Anyway, the time stole will never come back. The Count of Monte Cristo satisfies the fantasies of everyone who has ever dreamed of winning the lottery or who has idly plotted revenge against their enemies, knowing full well they will never act on their darkest desires. Monte Cristo is like a 19th century Superman. His miraculous Houdini-like escape from prison, when he manages to escape drowning even though a cannonball is tied to his feet, sets the tone for what follows. Everything goes right for the formidable Count, who seems like a lord in charge of his own destiny and that of others. Dantes is a vengeful and religious person, and it can be seen when he says, "I maintain my pride in the face of men, but I abandon it before God, who drew me out of nothingness to make me what I am."
How did I escape? With difficulty. How did I plan this moment? With pleasure.
The theme of the Count of Monte Cristo is one of vengeance and forgiveness, power and powerlessness. When Dantes is unfairly given a life prison sentence by his enemies, Villefort, Danglars, and Fernand, he spends every waking moment planning his revenge. As soon as Dantes miraculously escapes and returns to the world with riches, he sees it as a sign that God has opened for him the door of revenge. The Count of Monte Cristo is a great story that helps you to realize how far the riches of vengeance can really go. Some of the Count's actions could be seen as unnecessary. In the end, everyone will be punished or regarded by God, and you shouldn't be worried about what other people do or say as much as you are worried about yourself. But he wanted to get even. 14 years behind bars in a dark cell gave Dantes a criminal's mind. Instead of the innocent, carefree, life-loving boy of 19, Dantes is now a hardened, cynical, and mistruthful man in his mid-30s. Monte Cristo paled at the horrible sight. He realized that he had gone beyond the limits of rightful vengeance, and that he could no longer say, "God is for me and with me."